Star Walker Studios presents Game Master's Journey, your multi-dimensional RPG podcast. Dungeon Master Chris from the Dungeon Master's Block podcast joins me on the show today to discuss game mastering and world building. So join me on the journey. Together, we can become game masters truly worthy of the title. Hello, listener. Greetings, fellow GM and or player. Welcome to episode 72 of Game Master's Journey, your multi-dimensional RPG podcast. I'm your host, Lex Starwalker, and I'm transmitting to you today from the Obsidian Monolith somewhere outside time and space. I'm really excited to bring you this episode today. Dungeon Master Chris is joining me on the show from the Dungeon Master's Block podcast, which if you haven't checked out that podcast, what are you waiting for? You should check it out. It's a great show. But we're going to talk about game mastering in general and about world building and running your first game in your own campaign world. Pretty cool stuff. Before I get to the interview, though, I want to send a huge shout out and thank you to Mr. Steve Strickland, our Tier 5 patron here at Star Walker Studios. Thank you, Steve. You rock, sir. And if you would like to support the show and support Star Walker Studios, becoming a patron is a great way to do so. And you can find out more about that by just clicking the Patreon button at the top of the show notes at starwalkerstudios.com. So now that we've gotten our formalities and introductions out of the way, let me get Chris on the comm, and we're going to talk about game mastering and world building. Dungeon Master Chris from the Dungeon Master's Block podcast is joining me on the show today. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. You're, I think, one of the more prolific RPG podcasts out there.
Oh, well, that's very nice. I don't know what anybody else gets for, plays and stuff like that. So I was like, I don't even know how well we do, but I will take your word for it. Thanks.
It seems that way. So maybe tell us a little bit about your podcast in case someone out there hasn't heard of it.
Yeah, so we started a podcast about a year and a half ago. I think it was end of July 2014. And we just had the intention. We were kind of looking around, and my co-host Mitch and I were like, man, there's some Dungeon Master podcasts out there, but there's some phenomenal ones out there, but some of the other ones had gone for a while and then stopped going, or were very, very sporadic in how often they were doing it. So we're like, as everybody with good intentions going into the podcasting world says, we're going to do this and we're going to stick with it. And right. We were like, we decided that we were going to stick with it, and here we are. And we're just a couple of guys that want to help people get better, whether through creativity or through, if we talk about how to homebrew things or whatever. We just want to help people become better at being game masters in whatever genre they play, not just Dungeons and Dragons. So that's a little bit about what we do. Yeah. Awesome.
So how long have you been gaming? From the show, it sounds like forever.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I started in middle school in 6th or 7th grade. I don't remember. But one of my friends, he was like, yeah, I got my dad's 3.5, or no, I think it might have been 2nd edition then. I don't even remember, because I only played a couple of games, because I'm from the area of the United States where if you played Dungeons and Dragons, it was considered like you are the spawn of Satan because you're playing Dungeons and Dragons. So I couldn't drive at the time. So I said, Dad, I got this great game I'm going to play with my friends. Can you bring me back and forth from school so I can play this? And he's like, absolutely not. There's no way that you are going to go and play Dungeons and Dragons with your friends. And so we switched over to a Star Wars game back in the day that was around. And so we were playing that for a while. And then once I started driving and got into college, we started playing 3.5 Dungeons and Dragons quite frequently, along with Pathfinder with my brother and things like that. So I've played RPGs and games and things like that probably since early middle school years. So
nice. And were you the one that would tell your parents you were at like a football game or something? And
oh, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, we would totally, or we would just say, hey, we're going to be watching Lord of the Rings or something at a friend's house, and we would have it on in the background, but we would totally be playing Dungeons and Dragons or something to that effect.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we had to be very sneaky. I mean, with like Harry Potter books and stuff too, I had to find hiding places around the house so I could read them, and it was crazy growing up like that. And now still not something I necessarily talk about with my parents when I see them, but it's always in for a good laugh.
Yeah. I grew up in Indiana, so it was very similar.
Yep.
And I did a similar thing too, where I found that people might be worried if I was playing D&D, but for some reason Star Wars everybody was okay with.
Everybody was fine with it. Yep. I've tried making the argument like, oh, C.S. Lewis, like great author of
right.
Chronicles of Narnia, Lord of the Rings. They all use magic and witchcraft, but for some reason they just overlook that. And I was, it's a pointless argument with people that
right.
Don't have aren't willing to budge in any sort of way. So, yeah.
So you've been playing for a long time. At what point did you try running a game for the first time?
Yeah, so Mitch had been DMing for probably like 3 or 3.5 years. And he was kind of like, oh my gosh, like I love playing Dungeons and Dragons. And we were in college at the time, so we were doing like 14-hour days of Dungeons and Dragons, where it was like, hey, we're done studying. Like, what do? We don't have money to buy the newest video games, but we have these books, so let's play Dungeons and Dragons for 14 hours. And so we were playing with like 8 to 12 people in a group and whatnot. And he just got to the point after we graduated where he's like, I can't run a game every single week like this, because he was starting to get burned out between work and everything else that was going on. He's like, if you want to, like, you could do this. And I had some interest. I said to him, like, hey, I would love to do this, because I have stories I like to tell, as every little kid does, grows up, has these stories. Now I have a chance to actually make them come to life and people to play in them. So I was like, man, I got so many stories running around in my head from when I was a kid, or, when I was bored at work or whatever. I'm going to give this a shot. And that was probably 2 years ago now, I think.
Oh,
a little
wow.
over 2 years ago. Yeah, so I haven't been DMing very long at all. But I've been playing for much, much longer than that. So
awesome. Very cool. So did Mitch kind of mentor you as a new GM?
Yeah, I mean, it was, I more just like watched things that he would do and would, try things out and see if they work. There was never the classic, all right, let's go sit down somewhere. Let's talk about techniques to, be a dungeon master, things to do, things not to do, It was more like I just watched, and I watched various videos on YouTube of whether it was Acquisitions Incorporated or listening to Critical Hits or, whatever.
Yeah.
And just just slowly picked up on things that worked for me and didn't work for me. And if you're going to continue to get better, you have to constantly be looking for things and watching things and reading things. And so that's just a lot of where I got inspiration from, and, just learned how to take things to heart that I've watched or read or seen done. So
awesome. So now that you've gotten experience with both, do you have a preference of what side of the table you like to sit on, or do you like them both?
Oh, I love them both. I love either side of the table. I'm going to be telling a story. And so with any of my characters that I play, there's going to be an in-depth story to them. And I love developing characters because that's like the portion of it that I can control for the most part and go into it. And then on the other side, it's much more work, I think, to be a DM, as you're probably aware. But you're still getting to tell that same type of story, but you're also getting to incorporate other people that are trying to tell stories, and you're like the maestro directing the campaign wherever it's going to go. So I love both sides of the table.
Awesome. So you started out running Dungeons and Dragons, right?
Yes. Yep, I did.
Now, did you start out building your own world right away, or did you run in a published setting?
I did. I started out in my own world, Panthea, and it started with one city called Riveran. I took it. I think that's from Skyrim, isn't it? Riveran. I was like, that sounds like a cool name. I think I'm gonna put that into my world in the land of Mogaria. And so I started out with one main place where everybody could run free and do whatever they wanted. But I have run published things too. Like I've done the starter set and for 5th edition and some various old dungeons for 3.5 and whatnot. And I definitely prefer homebrew stuff just because you have much more creativity and flexibility within them. But
yeah, well, that's really cool. I've been doing a series of like world building episodes on the show about creating my own world for D&D finally, and I also recently started doing a series for new GMs, and I imagine a question that a new GM might have is, should I just run in a published setting and do published adventures? Is it too soon to try to jump in and make my own world? And so that's what you did.
Yeah.
So it can be done.
I think you can do. I mean, see, I had years and years before of like understanding rules for 3.5, so it wasn't like I just jumped in without having any sort of background knowledge of what 3.5 was or anything. But yeah, I mean, if you have never played before and you just have a group of friends, I would totally recommend getting like a starter set for those, because they give you a really good overview of like what rules you'll come in contact with, which ones will play a big part, and it gives you a really good base for anything that you're going to do in the future. And then you just go into, if you want to, you can go into doing homebrew campaigns, which are really, really fun. So
awesome. So you said that you started out with just a city for your world. Can you kind of tell us like what you had when you started? Like, did you just have the city, or did you have some more than that?
Yeah, I guess I started out with the country of Mogaria. I drew it out on a piece of paper and then photoshopped it and stuff like that. But yeah, I started out with that, and then I was like, all right, what city do I want to start with? Because I had like the city of Florosa and Northland and Riveran and a couple of other ones in that country. And I was like, all right, guess I just got to pick one. Which one am I going to go with first? And so I picked one that was at the crux of 3 rivers coming together from the northern part of the country, and then it went out to sea from there. So it was like this major trading city. There wasn't a lot of people that lived there because everybody was constantly coming and going, doing trading goods and whatnot. But the people that lived there were pretty hustle and bustle all the time because there was constantly money to be made. And it was a very diverse city too, because the people that settled there were people that loved the area and had traveled from all over the world. Because it's hard to explain this without having the map, but the lower continent of Panthea is like almost like a J shape, just without the tail going back up.
Okay.
So that's kind of what it looks like. And Mogaria is all the way down at the lower left corner. So it's like, if anybody's going to come around from one side and come down to the southern part of the world, they're going to have to pass through that city because it's right on the point of Mogaria. So it's, anybody that's going to take a ship up and around or, come back and around, it's at a pretty focal point of the world. So people are very, very diverse culturally in that city specifically. So
awesome. Sounds great.
Yeah, that was the one that we did our first campaign in, and it burned down. It got destroyed by dragons, and then it was rebuilt. So that's what happens when there's lots of wealth in an area, I guess.
Awesome. Well, if you can remember so far back, I'd love to hear kind of, how those first sessions went. Did you have a lot of fun with it? Were you scared to death? Did the players completely take you somewhere you didn't know you'd go?
Oh, totally. And I'm glad that I'm not like a super over the top control freak. Like, I like to have, consistency and things that I can expect to happen. But the first session, I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, I'm sweating. Like, I delayed us starting by 45 minutes just talking with everybody because I was so nervous to start the first time. So I was like, I don't want to suck. Like, I don't want this to be bad. Like, what do I do? All right, let's talk about what's going on in your life, and let's talk about what's going on in your life. And then eventually, when the conversation dies, we'll get started, I guess. So yeah, it was very nerve wracking for me. And I always, like, the first couple of times that I I DM'd, I would always ask everybody afterwards, how was it? Was it good? Did you have fun? Like you laughed at some parts that I thought were funny and some parts that I thought were going to be funny you didn't laugh at. Like I took everything to heart. Like when I first started GMing, and I was like, it was bad. And then, since then I was like, all right, you know what? You're telling the story. You know what it's like as a player. I create everything in my head that the DM says to me, and I create something way better than whatever the DM could say. And so I just kept telling myself that, like, that's what my players are doing. That's what my players are doing. They're creating something that's way better in their own head than what I could have possibly said from my notes. And so that really helped me a lot going forward. And since then, I don't really struggle with, worrying about what my players are thinking or whether this was a waste of their time or whatnot. But yeah, that was what the first couple of sessions were really like for me. So
awesome.
How about yourself? What was it like the first couple of times you DM'd?
Oh man, it was so long ago.
If you remember back that far.
Yeah, I don't remember being so nervous, but I think it was just, I was in high school, and you just think you're invincible, and it just doesn't occur to you to be nervous about things.
Sure, right, yeah, right.
But I was
so much testosterone running through my body.
Right. I was too worried about the girls to be worried about my gaming friends.
Yeah, right.
I had a lot of people in my group that had never played an RPG before, because I grew up in the middle of nowhere in Indiana, so actually D&D it wasn't like mainstream, but there was definitely a significant chunk of our school that was into that, because what else are you going to do? And all of the established role players were already in groups, so to find people to play my game, I had to find friends that had never played before.
Yeah.
So I think that was kind of nice, because they had no clue how bad I was. In a way, I think I was lucky, because they'd never played before, so it wasn't like they were comparing me to other GMs or anything.
Oh, sure. They had no prior experience of what was actually good within the RPG world.
and there was no real story to what I was doing. I had them attacking a keep or something, and I would just, out of nowhere, for no reason, a dragon would show up. And but
the classic things that everybody wants to fight, though. Like that's when you hear Dungeons and Dragons, you're doing a keep, which could be considered a dungeon, and you have a dragon coming in. So throw them in right away.
Yeah. So I think if I started now, I would definitely be nervous, but
yeah, we kind of gain a little bit more self-awareness as we get older, don't we?
Yeah. When you're 15, you just think everything you do is awesome. So
yeah, right. Yeah.
So are you still running in the same world today?
Yeah, I am. We just started our second campaign in that world. Actually, we did, the first one was about a year and a half of every other week, and then now we're doing one set in the Solarian Islands, which is in between two continents of Panthea in a channel. A couple of islands there, so kind of going back to the same, sort of, these are very wealthy, but there's not a lot of people here because it's an island type theme. So yeah, we're loving it right now, and they're getting into the mystery of what's going on behind everything. They've run into a cult of the volcano that is causing and wreaking some havoc within the world that they're all from. So it's pretty awesome. It's pretty fun.
Awesome. Yeah, that's, like, looking back, I really wish I would have started building my own world 20 years ago to have that history. That's really cool.
We had Lou Anders on. I don't know. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Lou Anders. He does the Thrones and Bones series book. He's an author. Like, he does. It's like preteen author-ish stuff. And he told us this. I don't remember if he had a quote or if he just said it. He's like, I wish I would have spent more time in college not focused on books, but on building my world. Because at this point in time, I could have had so much more stuff written and so much more in-depth things that I could go into in my world. Yeah. I thought that was just hilarious. He's like, yeah, when I had time, I wish I would have just focused it all on that. Because then I wouldn't have to do it all now when I'm trying to have a life outside of, building a world. So
yeah. Are any of the player characters from, like, your first campaign, are they still around, and have they become important people in the world?
They have, yeah. They haven't shown back up in this campaign. One of them was like there was Dale the Dragon, who was he was one of the first dragons ever created, and there's this item in my world called the Dragon's Fire that is what is used to produce dragons.
Okay.
But dragons don't ever breed. They're only produced from people that the head dragon runs into and says, "You're worthy. You're pure of heart. You can be turned into a dragon." And so one of our players ran into Dale. Dale became a very integral part of our last campaign. Dale ended up dying at the end, and our character turned into a dragon and is now in charge of reproducing the dragon's race, because the last campaign was called the Dragon War. So it was like a civil war between the good and the evil dragons. And so Ernie, our character, who was a Diabolus, had a really, really long name, but we just simplified it to Ernie. Decided that, he's the one that's going to take up the reins. He's going to be the one that, tries to rebuild the dragon's race. So he's still around. He'll be around for a really, really long time. And another one of our characters turned into the Phoenix, which there's like 4 main gods within my world. They're each representing a different element, earth, fire, wind, water. They're the main 4 gods within the world.
Okay.
And he was a phoenix of the fire god, Pinion. And so he went through this whole challenge. One of the old phoenixes was like, "I'm ready to die." He comes out of, where, his dimensional portal, turns to ash, rises as a phoenix. And then they say there's going to be a challenge that whoever is selected can participate in, and then whoever wins the challenge becomes the next Phoenix, who is, the guy who speaks on behalf of the god Pinion in the world of Panthea. And my brother's character, Martin, actually became that Phoenix within the world. So there's a couple that are still around at this point in time. And that was kind of like my way of like, all right, I'm going to give them something to solidify them within the world, so that they'll want to keep coming back and playing.
Yeah.
But also like for me to be able to say, all right, I have some people that are now possible NPCs that players could run into 2 or 3 or 4 campaigns down the road somewhere. So
very cool. So how long was that first campaign in like real time?
In real time, it was probably I would say a year and a half of every other week. So it was probably about 3/4 of a year, maybe a little bit less, because we, groups are never fully consistent. So
sure,
we would miss, every so often. But it was probably about probably 6 months to 6 to 9 months worth of weeks being run. So
awesome. And now with the new campaign, it sounds like maybe you're developing a different part of the world now, or?
Yeah, I'm developing a different part of the world now. So, I have it for the most part developed, but I'm trying to flush out like, who are some NPCs that are important in this world? What are these characters going to do that's going to mark something in history that happened? So yeah, we're slowly working our way through that campaign too. But this one will be much, much shorter than the other one.
Now, are you guys playing 3rd edition D&D? Is that what you're playing?
No, we were, and I switched over to 5th edition this past time.
So you skipped 4th too, huh?
Because I had taken some time off from playing D&D when I first got into college, because my group from high school moved away, and then I was going to community college here, but I didn't know anybody there that played, and I was working, full time while I was going to school, so I really didn't have a lot of time to do it. And so that was right around the time that 4th edition rolled out, and I started playing again about 3 years after it came out, once I got to school, where Mitch and I went together and started actually getting back into playing again. And then by that time, it was already D&D Next was coming out, and they were doing play testing. And so it was like, do we go to 4th edition? He's doing 3.5. I know 3.5. Well, let's just do that. And then 5th edition came out, and I was like, well, I'll just jump to that. So I can't specifically speak words of wisdom or anything into why people hate 4th edition so much, because I never really played it other than a Gamma World. But I skipped right over 4th edition.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Almost actually the same story. I took some time off, a few years off from gaming, just because I was moving around the country and stuff. And when I started getting back into it, it was during the 4th edition heyday. And I watched some stuff on YouTube and whatnot, and I read through the player's handbook, and I wasn't really digging it. And so then I discovered Pathfinder. So I actually did Pathfinder for a while, and then now I'm back into D&D with 5th edition. So
gotcha.
So I'm curious, how was that transition? You know, you're running in your own homebrew world, going from 3.5 to 5th. Was that at all difficult, or was it pretty straightforward?
Well, I had gotten the books probably 6 months before we made the switch, so I had just digested them and read through them, and was constantly looking at Reddit, and everything was 5th edition at that point in time. So I had immersed myself pretty heavily in learning 5th edition before we switched over.
Okay.
And some of the players in our groups had done the same. Some of them had gotten some of the books because they saw they were super cheap on Amazon, and we had done the 5th edition starter set just to get a taste of whether or not this would be something that we wanted to switch over to in the future. We did it. Half of our group was like, no, we're not going to switch over. And half of our group was like, yes, we're going to switch over. And now everybody's Mitch is doing like a hybrid between, he's kind of like created a way to do skills from,
okay,
because he doesn't necessarily like the skills that 5th edition kind of just simplifies it all to.
Right.
So he's doing kind of a hybrid of the two still, with skills being their own thing, and everything else doing 5th edition. And I've just fully jumped into 5th edition. So our players are getting a pretty healthy dose of 5th edition. So
awesome. This might be a redundant question then, but what's your favorite RPG to play or DM?
Oh gosh, I love some of the ones that don't have a lot of rules. Like we just played the other day. We played We're All Gonna Die. I don't know if you've heard that one before.
No.
It's basically like it's this game. You can look it up online. It's like 5 sentences of how you play it or something. It's basically you're telling a story. Everybody puts their name on a piece of paper, puts it in a hat, and then you as the GM pull the name out, and that's the person that lives at the end. And so you're shaping this whole story around a series of events, and your players that you have like 3 things that they're really good at, 2 things that they're really bad at, and you use those to your advantage. And so we had this crazy story where my brother and my wife was playing and my friend Jared was playing, and they all had to go to Walmart for various reasons. And my brother, it was like everybody turned into like a almost like a mutated zombie type creature. Just all of a sudden they just changed. And my brother had like this old lady who he knocked out of a power scooter gnawing on his leg at the end. And like, it was just Jared, my friend Jared's character got beat to death by tires that, became animated. And so it was just this really fun game. So I like games like that. I love, I haven't ever GM'd it, but I've watched it and I want to GM it, called Dread. I don't know if you've heard of that one before.
No.
Using the Jenga tower.
Oh, yes, I have heard of that.
So that's one I really want to do. We've played and we've done Everybody as John before. That's a really fun one. That would be one worth checking out too. It's pretty quick, pretty simple. So I've only ever GM'd for a large period of time Dungeons and Dragons. That's the only one that I've done so far.
Okay.
But I hope to get into Fate someday, because we've tried it a couple of times and I love the idea of it, but we've just never had a consistent enough group to play it all the way through. And Star Wars Edge of the Empire, of course, would be one that I would love to get into. So
cool. Awesome.
How about yourself? What are ones that you have either GM'd or what's your favorite one, I guess, of all of them?
Oh, that's tough. I'd say right now my favorite's probably 5th edition.
Okay.
But Numenera would be right up there too.
That's one. Yeah, that's another one that I want to play with that, because they use the Cipher system, right?
Yeah.
Numenera. Yeah. That's another one that I really have heard a lot of good things, and their last Kickstarter killed it. Yeah. I mean, they just destroyed everything that they thought that they were going to possibly even make. Yeah. So yeah. That
game's a lot of fun because you can kind of do whatever you want. Like in the world, like any crazy idea you might come up with will work.
Right. Yeah. That, from what I've heard and what I've seen played, that's pretty much how it happens.
Yeah. And the weirder, the better. So.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I've actually been trying to do that a little bit with D&D, because I think that's kind of stuff works really well in D&D too.
Right.
Kind of weird stuff.
Yeah. Oh, totally. The weird stuff are the things that I think leave the most lasting memories, though, too.
Yeah.
They're the ones that your players will remember for a very, very long time.
Now, one thing I noticed when you were telling us a little bit about your setting is it doesn't sound like you're not afraid to change things. So like you were talking about how dragons work and they work differently in your world. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it's fun because it's, I don't know, I like to change the preconceived notions that are out there about specific things. So like I'll even in a battle, like I've done this before where it's like, if you've played an entry level Dungeons and Dragons, you've probably run into orcs before. After one battle, what their AC is because everybody hits around it, things like that. So I'll even go so far to like, hey, one of these orcs has a different type of armor, to just be like, oh, this one has a 12 AC, now this one has a 14 AC, just to like throw players off and just change what people think they know about the game. But yeah, as far as like dragons and stuff, I love dragons, and I wanted to make something that was unique to the world of Panthea, that people don't necessarily know how dragons work. Like dragons in Panthea they were created also as ways, like the original ones were created as people that were pure of heart, that were able to rise to the top of government to help create this utopian world. Well, obviously that didn't work, but that was the general idea. They were good intentioned. Dragons that had been created, they were all good at the very beginning, and then there was a split that happened because some of them got the taste for what power was actually like, and it corrupted them, and there were ones that were like, no, we have to stay pure to what we were. And so yeah, I like to change things up a little bit, just to make it unique to the world that we're playing in.
Awesome. So you've been working on this world for quite some time, and I just started mine earlier this year. So I did kind of like, it sounds like what you were talking about, where I took a small area and kind of focused on that to get started. Yeah. But for me and other people like me that, we've done that, we've gotten our world off the ground, and now we're wanting to expand. Any advice or suggestions on what to think about next after you've got that first adventure area kind of nailed down?
Yeah, I think the one thing, and something that I've tried to do, is like, all right, if I were playing in this world, what would be the next area that I would want to explore?
Okay.
So if, with Mogaria, they started there, and then it was like, okay, what's another area that I want to explore? Oh, let's go to the island right next to it, because there's a place that I created called the Shattered Islands. Well, what's that all about? I don't even know what that's all about, but that's intriguing because I just decided to write that name down. So let's go and explore that a little bit more. So I think just, one piece of advice is, what intrigues you as a world builder? What do you want to build next? Or you could use, if you're playing with your players in a world, you could simply ask them too. Because they're going to be the ones that are playing within the world. So if it's like, hey, do you guys have any sort of idea where you want to go next? Oh, that area looks really cool on your map. What's there? I don't know. We'll start working on it. I'll get something out there for you, and you can go and play there. I think awesome. That's one thing that you could do. If you've created an area, one fun thing to do is to create a calendar too, with some like world events, and then also like specific country events, and flush those out a little bit. Okay. That's something fun to always do. Man, that's such an open-ended question. So many possibilities. What do you do next?
Well, I remember you guys did a whole episode on calendars and history. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And yeah, so anyone listening, if you want more world building, definitely go check out Dungeon Master's Block, because you guys have quite a few episodes that are all about
I think
world
we have
building.
3 or 4 now. And everyone you can glean something from for world building. But yeah, as far as specific world building ones, I think we have like 4 or 5 now specifically. Yeah. So. And
also you have ones where you go into some of the deities in D&D and talk about those.
Yeah, those are fun too. Creating gods is hard. It can be hard.
Yeah.
Because you're like, man, what what's the history of a god like? I'm not a god, so I don't know what the history of somebody that's immortal looks like. So to create something, so I don't necessarily go into like the whole timeline of this is what the god did when, but I create like, holy books and rituals that are done, and what do the worshipers look like? What do the clerics look like? What are some rumors that you've heard about this? Does he or she have any like weapons or specific things that, items that people could find? So that's always something fun to do too, is to create your own gods. Because then people are familiar if they play Dungeons and Dragons with like Olimara and Pelor and some of the other ones. But when you create your own, people are like, whoa. What is Obrus all about? Oh, well, let me tell you, he's the druidic god in the world. That's what he's in charge of. He's in charge of nature and things like that. So, and then instantly the druid's like, oh man, should I be worried about how I represent myself in front of this god? Like, how do I move up the ranks within the druidic clergy and things like that? So, I think just creating. I love creating things that aren't D&D canon, just because it pushes players to think outside of what they've always known, to help them have a little bit more fun. So
yeah. So speaking of the gods, I gotta ask, since you started out with 3.5 and now going to 5th, have you been at all bothered by the sudden domain shrinkage?
No, not really. I've never, I don't know. I that's one area that I haven't specifically, like, I have all these gods, but I don't necessarily have like places that I don't know. I'm not really bothered by it that much. I just work around it.
Yeah.
And once again, like, if it doesn't, like, and they say this in the books too, if it doesn't work for you, don't worry about it. Like, this is a game that is supposed to be fun, and use it to create what you want to create. So, that doesn't necessarily bother me all that much.
You haven't created like 10 new domains?
No, I haven't. No. Maybe I will, but that's, I at this stage in life, I'm kind of weighing like, all right, what things should I put a lot of time into that players will actually come across, and what things would just be a waste of my time when I have other things to do at this point. So that might be one that I'm like, if they, ever want to know, I'll make something up on the spot. But, for now, we'll just leave it how it is.
Awesome. Yeah, that was kind of weird, because before 3rd edition, there were no domains.
Right.
But now it's like, it's become so much a part of my thinking.
Oh, sure.
That when I got 5th edition and I saw how few there were compared to how many gods there are, I'm like, oh, well, this is going to be rough.
Right.
Everybody's fighting over this handful of domains.
Right.
I tend to kind of equate them with portfolio, which I guess they don't necessarily have to be,
Right, yeah.
So gods can have very different portfolios, even if maybe they have the same domains. So.
Right, yeah. Yep.
So what I did for my world is I just made a god for each of the domains and just
called it good.
Yeah,
type of thing.
But I'm gonna need more gods eventually, so I don't.
Oh, totally.
I don't know what I'll do.
Well, and you could even do something where eventually, like, oh, there's a god infringing upon the other god's domain. God's fight or God's war, whatever you want to call it. Like, that sets it up for some really, really fun things within the world.
Heck yeah. Do you have any other tips or tricks when it comes to world building or just being a GM in general?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think the RPG Academy says this all the time, but if you're having fun, you're doing it right. And I would totally 100% agree with that. Like, if you're not having fun telling the story or things like, and I understand what, like, in DMs, there's this point where it's like, man, I just want to control. Like, I want to railroad them into the way that I want the story to go. And the DM just ends up not having fun doing something that they started out loving. And so it's like, man, if that's what it's going to become, either take a break or, just release a little bit of that just to, have fun. I mean, because it's a game you're playing with friends. It's not, it's not something that you're ever going to get evaluated on for a bonus or, whatever. It's like just have fun. And if you're not having fun, I don't know if, that would be the best area for you to spend your time. But yeah, I think just have fun. Read a lot of things. Like, just go out there. If you don't read or watch movies or something like that for inspiration. Like, I have folders in my computer and documents in my computer with like a page of things that I watched in a movie. I'm like, man, how could I transfer this into the world? What part of the history could this go in? And so take notes of things that you watch, of you read, and I think just practice. I mean, the more you practice it, the better you'll get. The more you refine it, you might start out and think you're the bee's knees, and you find out you were actually really bad at it. And if you find out, or if you know you're really bad at it, just keep plugging away. Just keep going at it. Because really the only way you're going to get better is by continuing to practice. So I would say that is also another thing. So have fun, read, and just keep practicing. Those would be 3 things that I would recommend to people.
Cool. Yeah, I just I've been watching a series from BBC about British castles lately.
Oh, nice. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, I
haven't seen that.
It's been great. Like, each episode they focus on one castle. Like they did the Tower of London and Dover Castle. And
nice. My wife, she was over in Romania for 6 months back a couple years ago. And she was telling me about Transylvania. She was telling me about the castles over there, and she, like with Nosferatu and Dracula and things like that, or just Dracula. And we watched. She was like, "Yeah, totally. We got to watch this movie, Dracula. What was the newest one? Dracula Untold or something like that? Is that? I don't remember. It was the newest Dracula movie that came out, and I was like, wow, there are so many." I want to do an all vampire campaign now. This is absolutely phenomenal. Yeah. It was so good. And so that might be something that we do in the future. But yeah, I think just watching things like that. You'll have to send me the link to that BBC documentary on castles, because that sounds awesome, and that's something that I wanna watch. But yeah, the BBC does a lot of great stuff like that, documentaries and whatnot.
Yeah, and just to get, even if you don't get like an actual idea, just to get, a sense of what it would be like to be in a place like that.
Oh, totally. Yeah, it helps you as a DM get into that mindset. And even if you don't get an idea in the moment, it could be something that something is happening in your campaign and triggers something that you saw within that documentary or movie or whatever, and it's like, oh, that would be great to plug in here. So it sets you up for success in the future by watching things like that.
Yeah, totally. Well, awesome, Chris. I really appreciate you taking your time to come on here and talk to us a little bit about...
Yeah, now that we actually got it to work.
Yeah.
It took a little while, but we got it. We're finally together.
That's right. Was there anything else you wanted to add or talk about?
Yeah, no, I just keep having fun. Do what you love. Enjoy gaming, because it's what brings a lot of people together. So I just say, have fun.
Well, thanks so much. I'm glad we finally were able to do this.
Yeah, no kidding. So yeah, it was great. It was a real honor and a real pleasure to be on. So thank you.
I want to thank Chris again so much for coming on the show and talking with us today. Really appreciate it. And if you'd like to learn more about Chris and how to get into contact with him, and or learn more about the Dungeon Masters Block podcast, just head on over to the show notes for episode 72 at starwalkerstudios.com/Game Masters Journey. And I'll have some links there for you so that you can get hooked up. Also, in the show notes, you can find a link to the Google Plus community for Game Master's Journey. Really suggest that you join us there. A lot of great people there. We're getting up close to 700 members now, so that's pretty sweet. If you would like to reach me, the best way to do so is by email, gamemastersjourney@gmail.com. You can also follow me on Google Plus. Just search for Lex Starwalker, and on Twitter @Lex Starwalker. I hope that you have a chance to play your favorite RPG this week. And I hope that if you haven't already, you take a stab at being the game master and building your own world. There is no replacement. I'll be back soon with another episode of Game Master's Journey. Until then, game on.
This has been a Starwalker Studios production, your source for quality gaming and hobby podcasts.
This episode's music provided by Cloudwalker, Renfield, Transboy, and Ish. Please see the show notes for more details at starwalkerstudios.com/Game Master's Journey.